From the farthest reaches of the galaxy, the Midwest, you're watching Beyond the Blast Doors live.
It is December 30th, 2019. We are rolling into the beginning of a new year, but before we leave 2019, we must do one thing, and that is review The Rise of Skywalker, Star Wars Episode 9, dropping in theaters December 20th across the country. Welcome into Beyond the Blast Doors on a Monday. We are so glad that you're joining us, and I say we, I am so glad. It is the holiday season, and we are doing our various things. David Amelotti with you, David Gilbert, and Jesse Buck, also part of the BTBD Live crew. We work, we have family, we have relationships. We're all over the place, but I wanted to sit down today because I had family in town this past weekend, and that's what pushed BTBD Live to this moment, this morning. Want to sit down and do my first installment of reaction and review for The Rise of Skywalker. So I'm going to be giving you my impressions of the movie. It's going to be very spoiler heavy, so if you have not seen the episode yet, you have not seen the movie in theaters yet, you can come back to us. Go see the movie. Go see it twice. Go see it 3 times. I think David Gilbert is on his 7th viewing of The Rise of Skywalker as we speak. Then come back to us and get our impression of the movie. We don't want to influence you how you go into the movie. We just want to talk about the movie after you've come out of the theater. So how this is going to go is this is part 1, and then I think part 2 and 3 will obviously include David and Jesse, and we'll get everyone's take here. Hopefully be able to call some people in. I'd like to have Steve and Steven from St. Louis come in. We can have them on the show and get their impressions of this final installment of the Skywalker saga. And I'm just really excited to be with you in this moment to talk Star Wars. And I hope this makes sense the way I'm going to do this. Because I have not watched, I don't like to watch reaction breakdown videos of other people. People want us to do ours. Those who are in our BTBD Live family, they want to know what we think about the movie, and we've wanted to wait about a week and a half out of respect to everyone who has crazy schedules. I mean, I just got done explaining how, David's out traveling, seeing family. Jesse's busy with work. I had family in town this weekend, and so it's just so chaotic. Everyone's dealing with that because it's the holiday. Whether you celebrate Christmas or Hanukkah or whatever holiday you celebrate, you're getting pulled in a bajillion directions. So about 10 days, 2 weeks, we thought, okay, let's go ahead and lift the shroud. Let's talk spoilers about The Rise of Skywalker. We've been really tight-lipped about this movie on our channel in recent weeks. One reason, The Mandalorian. And we can talk about that at some point, whether it's in part 1 or part 2. But The Mandalorian has taken the vast amount of energy in the Star Wars fandom, and for good reason. It's a lot of fun. 8 chapters. 8th chapter came out this past Friday, the longest episode of the 8 episodes, and it was fantastic. But we want to make sure that everyone had a chance to dive into the theater and go have that theatrical experience. I will tell you that I've seen the movie twice, and so the way I've broken this down for the show that we're doing right now, I'm going to break down the characters' performance, actors and actresses' performance first. Then I want to go into plot points, and then we'll go into the live chat, and we'll get people's reaction there. I will jump into the live chat throughout this whole thing, but I want to stay on target. Okay, I want to really rock this out. I want to try and keep this within an hour and 10 minutes. I see the live chat is already hot. We got Real Farm Boy in there, Mr. Rez. We got Charlie Skywalker in there. Do me a favor, if you're enjoying the live show on a Monday morning, December 30th, 2019, go ahead and share this episode, this live stream right now on all your social media. Let's try and get as many people into this live conversation as possible. And just a reminder that you can always catch us. Our normal time is Sundays right now at 11 a.m. Central, live on YouTube. So that's noon Eastern. You can get the rewind on YouTube, but you can also find us on iTunes, Spotify, SoundCloud. However you are enjoying the show, we are glad that you are with us. So let's go ahead and start with characters. And like I said, we're going to go to characters. We're going to go to the plot points, and we might jump around here and there, but I want to stay pretty focused. So the way I'm going to do this is I want to start with the new characters, or the lead primary characters for this sequel trilogy, this Disney trilogy. and then we'll go to our original trilogy characters that make an appearance here, and then we'll identify the new characters specifically for this movie, and we will go about it that way. And I think this will work fairly well. So with that said, our first character here on the Rise of Skywalker reaction review part 1 here on Beyond the Blast Doors is none other than Rey. I think by far this is Daisy Ridley's best performance as far as these 3 movies go. In a interview prior to, I think this was actually set on the red carpet, but the premiere, Daisy Ridley spoke about how she feels more confident now, and that the evolution of Rey is definitely a reflection of her comfort as a person. And I definitely see that in the Rise of Skywalker. And it's not just the exchange between characters, but it is just the mannerisms of Rey that I can really buy into here in the Rise of Skywalker, that Rey is on a more concrete path, despite the fact that the Rise of Skywalker starts with her being very uncertain. She's nose deep into these Jedi texts. She was lacking some confidence, but it wasn't like the confidence of, I'm not sure what move to make here. It was, I was watching Rey fully immersed in the situation, that Luke Skywalker has been gone for a year. She's been training with Leia, and it's game time. She has to show up. She has to be the one that steps up and saves the galaxy. And if you're thinking of that in like realistic terms, that's an amount of pressure that I can't fathom. Anyone could fathom. And you know the stakes are high, and I say that reluctantly here. I say that reluctantly here at the start of the movie, because we get the crawl. We get the opening crawl, right? And the crawl says the dead speak. And the crawl explains how there's this message that has gone out to the galaxy from the from the Emperor. Palpatine is back, and he is going to have this master plan, and we learn about how the First Order is kind of just a ploy. The final order is this mass army of Star Destroyers and followers that the Emperor has developed over the last 30 years, or maybe even longer. I think that's where, when I read that opening crawl, and then we see at the very beginning how all of the destroyers rise up, I'm thinking, well, how does this work with like Operation Cinder that we learn about in Battlefront 2? I mean, just how many plans did the Emperor have in case he were to fail? Just something to think about. But going back to Rey, I think that Daisy Ridley won the chemistry on camera, especially with Poe and Finn. I love the back and forth. Obviously there's a lot of stress right now in the galaxy, right? We're up against our backs here, having to take down this great threat. But I like the friendly banter. I banter with my friends like that. I banter with Gilbert and Jesse like that. I really enjoyed that. The camaraderie, but also the difference of opinion. There was some misdirect with Poe and Finn. We'll talk about that in a little bit. I thought it was really interesting. But what I really appreciate, there were some genuine moments in this movie that Rey was at the focus of. I thought that she and Carrie Fisher, for the way they could bring in Carrie, it worked. It wasn't always smooth. Some shots, I'm thinking of the one where Carrie Fisher, Leia, is holding the saber. That definitely didn't feel like that was the original shot. But they're doing what they can. The creators at the helm of this movie made the decision that we are not going to CGI Leia. We are going to have Carrie Fisher in this movie. And I think for what it's worth, it worked really well. You kind of felt like the scenes were built around, right? The scene had to kind of be crafted around what Carrie was delivering. I thought it worked well for that opening scene. Loved seeing Rey there levitating with all the rocks spinning around. And, I think one thing this movie does try and do is it tries to address the OP Rey. And this has been something that I've been struggling with ever since we got The Force Awakens, which I'm so down with the character of Rey. I love this message of that you can be anybody in your world, and you can make the decision to go on the adventure that changes your life, the lives of people around you. You can change the world. You don't have to be the Skywalker blood, or you don't have to be the royal family. You don't have to be, you don't have to be someone of elite status or connected to a family of elite status to be successful. And so this kind of ties into one of my overall maybe issues of this movie. But I've always been on board with Rey, but I never understood how can a person be so strong in the Force, demonstrate skills that she's maybe not seen performed elsewhere with such ease. Yet when we go to the prequels, we see Jedi training in the temple for decades. Decades. You see the younglings. They're going to be there for another 15 years maybe training. And I know, it's just a movie. It's Star Wars, but it's kind of an inconsistency. And so obviously with the reveal of Palpatine, and seeing that Rey has been studying with Leia this last year, studying from the Jedi texts, and maybe learning from Leia what Luke taught her. I think that balances out a little bit. I don't think it explains everything, but you have 2.5 hours in a movie to try and solve all these questions that have been built up since The Force Awakens. And I don't know if there's a specific time to bring this up, but the one question that I wanted answered that I did not get answered was how the hell Maz Kanata got that lightsaber. But I guess the idea is that she's a collector. She's 1,000 years old. She came across the hilt, and that's how she had it. And that's fine. I can move along. I can live with that. But I thought Daisy really absolutely crushed it. I really enjoyed her performance. I don't think you watch... I don't think there's like an Oscar award-winning performance here. I mean, maybe John Williams will get something for the score, because I thought that there's two things that connect all 9 movies, right? It's Palpatine Shroud, and it's also John Williams' score. I thought he did an exceptional job. I'm no like musical mastermind. I was in concert band for 7 years, okay? But he did a really cool job of bringing in all those great masterpieces from the prequels and the original trilogy, and the new themes that he's made for the sequel trilogy. I think that the Kylo Ren theme, I think that is one of the best pieces of Star Wars music ever created by John Williams. I just love it. The heavy brass, it's wonderful. But he probably will get at least a nomination for best musical composition or best score. But I don't know. I just had the thought of, man, I really need to get that on vinyl. I'm gonna make a note of that. Let's go ahead and say that's it for Rey right now, and let's go ahead and talk about the next character on our list, which we're talking about Rey, and I'm gonna try and pull her up right now, so that way we have the ability to go to Finn. And I thought that this was an interesting moment, not just an interesting moment. Obviously, you're seeing here, Rey chasing after, or Finn chasing after Rey on the remnants of the Death Star, the second Death Star. I was really excited to see how involved Finn, the character, was in this movie, because he was pushed aside from the main story in The Last Jedi. And I love John Boyega, his intense delivery of almost every line. It's not overacting. Finn is trying to, how do I say this? What John Boyega does is he is filling Finn with intensity. This is a character that was a First Order stormtrooper, we'll say abducted at birth from his parents, and he grows up in the system, and he sees that it's flawed, and he's put to the test, and he has to kill these innocent people, and he has this thing called like a conscience that somehow bursts through all the brainwashing, and he's not going to kill those villagers back in The Force Awakens. And then you go on this new story of how this former stormtrooper goes off and joins the Resistance, and in The Last Jedi, yeah, he's hesitant of his place. His focus is still Rey, and he's trying to figure out his whole role and everything. And in a way, Rey is Finn's MacGuffin. We've been through Canto Bight sequence. We know it didn't work. We know it really derailed that movie. It kind of sabotaged the story for some, not all. Some people really liked it, but not all. In Rise of Skywalker, Finn is a center point, and he plays a critical role in helping defeat the Final Order. And it was great to see the intensity in which he in which he brought to the screen, because it's believable. What makes starships and space wizards and lightsabers feel real, feel lived in, sing like passion, like this is do or die. And this is a thought that kind of had my mind go blank a moment ago. One of the things that I said was, Rey, Finn, and Poe are up against the wall here. Their backs are to the wall because Rey has to go hunt down the Emperor. Poe is now going to lead the Resistance, what there is, in hopes that we're able to get some reinforcements from the galaxy. And Poe is just coming to terms with the fact that he is in the Resistance. He has joined the cause, and he wants to bring this thing down. He has a family after all this time. And I think John Boyega does that really well, whether he's interacting with Poe. And there was a lot of hype around Poe and Finn. Would they be... would they have an on-screen kiss? Would they be the LGBTQ representation in this movie? And the way this movie plays out between John Boyega's Finn and Oscar Isaac's Poe, you really thought, yeah, that was going to happen. They were like really nitpicking each other, and you were trying to figure out why they were feuding. Finn has that scene with Rose Tico. I don't even have a graphic of Rose Tico for this show, and I'll tell you why. Because Rose Tico was in such a small amount of this movie. She was so cast aside that it wasn't even worth me bringing a graphic of her up. And I'm not trying to say that disrespectfully, but that's just the truth. J.J. Abrams, Chris Terrio, Kathleen Kennedy, everyone involved with this movie, the runtime was set at 2 hours and 22 minutes. And there is so much that you have to achieve. Rose, who is set up, I guess, as... I never thought that she was a love interest for Finn in Finn's eyes. She was somebody that kind of kept getting in his way of a plan. She confesses his love to him, but that kiss, I didn't feel like... John Boyega did not play that as like Finn wanting that kiss or wanting to continue that kiss. It was like, girl, I was just trying to blow up that cannon. Like, now we got to run. You get Finn and Rose here. It's like, hey, Rose, we're gonna go. You want to head out? And Rose is like, no. General Leia wants me to stay back, because that is not consistent with the character we got in The Last Jedi. Rose would have gone, but I think it was of real importance for those telling the story that you had the trifecta back together, and that was the focus. And you had Rey, Finn, and Poe together as much as you possibly could. And maybe that goes back to the fact that in Force Awakens, we never did get a moment with Carrie Fisher, Mark Hamill, and Han Solo, Harrison Ford's Han Solo, in the same scene together. Maybe it goes back to that. We won't make that mistake again. J.J. Abrams also didn't make the mistake of making sure that when Chewie suffered loss, that he got his moment on screen, which was a really nice touch with the medal. Don't have an image of Chewie either, but Chewie did really well in this movie too. I thought he was a standout. Giannis does a great job of carrying on the legacy of Peter Mayhew through Chewie. There's no doubt about that. So we've gone through Rey, we've gone through Finn. Loved both of them. I thought the humor, I think what Finn is able to do is bring in humor that sometimes other characters can't pull off, or maybe the scene isn't meant to have humor, but something about that character of Finn is great. I think of just like that speeder chase in the first act of the movie. The fact that you have them going around on this skiff and they're flying, and the jet troopers go off and they fly now. It's just, it worked well for me. It worked really well for me, and I really enjoyed that hug at the very end of the movie, where the three have realized they've done it. They've saved the galaxy, and you can't talk about that scene unless you also have Poe and C-3PO. This whole scene cracked me up. I mean, if there's anything to say about this movie, and we'll get to it in a bit, but it is so convenient, isn't it? Sometimes so convenient how this movie plays out, but you kind of have to have it happen that way, so that way the story advances. Because again and again and again, only 2 hours and 20 minutes to tell this story. You have to keep it moving. And Poe does that. And I think there's a great vulnerability that Oscar Isaac is able to display in The Rise of Skywalker. In Force Awakens, Poe is just this this pilot that's really good at shooting down TIE fighters, and you're kind of like, okay, he's like the new Han Solo, good looking, really good with the blaster, is a great pilot. Like, this is going to be a lot of fun. He kind of comes off bratty, more entitled in The Last Jedi, which I think I've been pretty open about The Last Jedi. Just for a movie that for events that are supposed to take so close to Force Awakens, it is so inconsistent. But Poe wants to do what he thinks is best, but I think The Last Jedi for Poe is all leadership learning. It's all soft skills that he's learning in order to ultimately be the leader that he has to become in The Rise of Skywalker. And whether that's here on Pisano, where he is trying to help his friends find this ship, find this relic, find this secret to find the Sith, which also that's something else we need to talk about. How the hell everyone knows about the Sith? The Sith are very commonly known in the age of Rise of Skywalker, and that doesn't add up. But I digress. Poe. In the movie, I really enjoy the vulnerability. I go back to the scene where he is there in the presence of Carrie Fisher, and he's basically like, I don't know how to do this. Like, I need your help. Basically saying, I'm scared, but I'm going to do this, and you've taught me everything. And then, that moment that moment is kind of broken up, and our story again has to unfold. It's cool to see. I think what's really cool about the trilogy formula is that you are able to be with some of these actors and characters through the whole way, and so you get to see those characters truly grow. And I think that the arc of Poe is one of the best that this sequel trilogy has to offer. I think that we know someone. I mean, maybe it's ourselves, someone who's like really good at something. And then life comes along and has to knock you down a few pegs, and you humble yourself out, and then you rise up, and then you exceed your own expectations. And I definitely think that's Poe. I really was happy with what Oscar Isaac brought to it, and again, I thought that the teasing with Finn and Poe worked really well. It was great misdirect. I thought it was funny. I think a lot of fans are outraged. About Poe and Finn not being the LGBTQ representation in this movie. Instead, it was in the background during the very end celebration. People are I think some people are like legitimately upset, and those are the people that spend their endless time on social media, and that's fine, But I think we've had this conversation a lot here on BTB Live. You cannot let your expectations or what you want the movie to be. You got to check that at the door. You can't go into these movies with the expectation that this will happen or this is how it's supposed to be. When Disney bought Star Wars, folks, that's when you had to throw what you thought Star Wars was supposed to be. You had to throw that out the window because that just wasn't going to happen. And so I think some of us felt burned with The Force Awakens. I did not. Some of us felt burned with The Last Jedi in some ways. So you go into the Rise of Skywalker with an open mind. I think you leave with a 2-hour, 20-minute spectacle, a lot of cool action sequences, and a story that, once you begin this movie, it is all speed ahead. They give you a timer of 18 hours. There's 18 hours until the Emperor will launch his Grand Army, the Final Order. And I have some issues with 18 hours. You can get to a lot of places around the galaxy in under 18 hours. It's really surprising. Okay, so we talked about Rey, we've talked about Poe, we've talked about Finn. I want to talk now about the droid that just stole this show. And maybe I'm going out of order for you, but I think this works really well to talk about C-3PO and how he plays a great role in this movie. I think the best moments of this, some of the best moments, I'll say that. Some of the best moments, if you were like to make like a top 10 moment list of this movie, you would have C-3PO in at least 3 of them. I think taking one last look at my friend's line worked really well. It didn't ultimately have great consequence because he gets his memory back from R2 at the end of the movie. But I love, and then like playing the Sith message through C-3PO, I thought that was really cool. The humor was great. the best utilization of C-3PO. Wish we could have had R2 going around, but it doesn't make as much sense, especially with those scenes where you have Rey and BB-8. BB-8 being the droid that Rey saved. So I wish R2 could have gotten a lot more play in these sequel movies. One of the things that I always enjoyed hearing George Lucas talk about was how we watch these movies through the eyes of C-3PO and R2-D2. They are us represented into those movies. So I thought the humor was great. I thought Anthony Daniels did his best 3PO in this movie, and I think that he might have been a little peeved about the lack of opportunity he had in The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi. And so, he came out swinging in this movie, so I think great utilization there. And, of course, he had BB-8, got involved a little bit and played a role, and you had Dio, this new droid that's found on the ship in Pisana, and how, he has information that can help advance the story, yada, yada, yada. They're all cute and they're all fun, and I think that from a practical effects standpoint, the droids should be definitely one of the things celebrated the most in this Disney sequel trilogy, because the science, the math to make a BB-8 function, like a real BB-8 roll around like that, is so cool. To see a Dio roll around like that, it's a lot of fun for me to witness, and to see those droids actually being used on set, I thought was really cool to see, rather seeing them on scene. So I thought that was pretty cool. I'm going to double check here. We are now going to go into, oh yes, how could I forget? This almost feels rude of me to have forgotten this, but yeah, Kylo Ren. Kylo Ren was in this movie, I'd say, a little bit. Adam Driver's the best acting performance in this Disney sequel trilogy. It's not even close. I just was on Twitter the other day, or not the other day, just this morning, and people were making their most underrated actors list of 2019. Adam Driver's on that list. A lot of people acknowledge Adam Driver on their most underrated actor of 2019 list. Why? The intensity, the vulnerability. I mean, in his face, his eyes. They always talk about a good actor, his eyes telling you the emotion. Whether it's the very beginning of the movie and it's the opening sequence where he's slaughtering folks, caretakers on Mustafar, whether it's the scheming or the slyness that he tries to use when he's speaking with the Emperor, coming face to face with the Emperor. You know how brave you have to be to go right up to the Emperor? Like, you're going to go fly to Exegol, right? Okay, you're going to get this Sith Wayfinder, okay? You're going to fly your happy self across the galaxy in, record time again, because apparently, Gakes, I don't understand, from Mustafar to Exegol, whatever, to get there, right? And then you walk in and you hear this voice, and it's like, my boy, I have been every voice that has ever been inside your head. A great sequence, and I stand by what I said a couple of weeks ago. If they would have shown that sequence of shots, because no one would have imagined that's how this movie started. No one would have imagined that would have been in the first minute and a half of this movie. But if you would have shown that a year and a half ago at D23, when you first showed the first images of Rise of Skywalker, I think the hype train would have been completely different. I don't think you could have ever derailed the focus of the Rise of Skywalker. I don't think The Mandalorian could have overpowered it. I think that was a kind of a big swing and a miss on the marketing campaign. You had the Emperor, and instead of teasing fans repeatedly over and over again, who some felt burned from The Last Jedi, some weren't in the loop at all, if you would have been like, boom, here is Kylo flying around the galaxy, you're hearing Vader's voice, you hear Snoke's voice, you hear the Emperor, and then boom, there is Ian McDiarmid as the Emperor back, completely different hype train. I mean, Rise of Skywalker is going to blast by $1 billion globally. But I was really hoping that the hype would have been a bit more intense. I just didn't feel the hype. I felt Force Awakens in 2015. The whole world felt that thing. That was incredible. And I just kind of hope that for the end of the Skywalker saga that it'd be a little bit higher. And, people can say what they want. Maybe, I don't think it's oversaturation. Look what the MCU does. That structure works for them pretty well. Fans could be upset, and that's valid. Also, it could just be, I don't know, maybe they just couldn't afford to go to the theaters. I don't know. I don't want to speculate on that stuff. But And the ferocity. The only thing, Kylo Ren in this movie makes me happy, and I'm being very specific in saying Kylo Ren makes me happy because from the very beginning, I have enjoyed that idea that the Skywalker blood could turn that sour and go into destruction. And you talk about how Han Solo's heart and the love of Leia is in Kylo, and he's making the decision. No, you all have failed me. Luke failed me. You failed me. I'm going to Snoke. Which, if you've read the first issue of The Rise of Kylo Ren by Charles Soule, cool comic, kind of creepy. He's hugging Snoke. I'm not into it. I don't understand it now because Snoke was like clones of something. Like, was he failed clones of the Emperor, or is Snoke like just like a test tube baby? I don't quite understand what Snoke is now. I think that I have more questions now. I thought I was going to go through Rise of Skywalker and have no questions about who that character was because I thought there would be no mention. And then you go into Exegol and there's like 4 or 5 dead Snokes bobbling in the water thing. It was pretty cool. I loved everything with Exegol. It was a straight horror film. To me, it was like it was why that last scene in Rogue One was so successful, was the horror sense of Vader coming down that hallway. Adam Driver definitely displays that complexity, how he's being pulled in multiple directions. Kylo Ren is my favorite. Is one of my favorite villains of all time, and I think he stacks up as a villain up there with Vader and Maul. I still stand by the fact that I wish that Kylo Ren would never have removed his helmet until the Rise of Skywalker, and I'll tell you the moment. And it's tied into Leia, and it's tied into Han. And I think some people might already know where I'm going with this. Whether you're listening here on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, or SoundCloud, or you're watching the live show on Monday here, but you're there on the other moon of Endor, the wreckage of the second Death Star. You have Rey, who has left Kylo, and you have already had Leia reach out through the Force and reach out to Kylo, and if I remember correctly, he turns around. We don't pan away, but then that's when like Rey overwhelms him, stabs him, heals him, and then she blows out of there, right? And then we get the Han moment. Han standing there on the wreckage of Death Star, and I haven't seen JJ confirm this, but I'm assuming this is a hallucination that Kylo is having, where he's speaking face to face with Han Solo. That scene was cool, and it kind of worked. It kind of reminded me of Field of Dreams. Hey, Dad, you want to play catch? But that scene was supposed to be originally Leia, and I think when you don't want to be greedy. It was a tragedy to lose Carrie Fisher. I think if you have Carrie Fisher come back as a Force ghost in that scene and deliver that soliloquy to Kylo Ren to turn him into Ben Solo again, that's one of the most powerful moments of the franchise. But with it being Han Solo, and you can hear the clanking of his boots on the metal, and I get it. It was replaying the moment where Kylo killed his dad, his father. And I love that little bit. Dad, I know. That was really well done. What a great plan B. Okay, we don't have Carrie to do this, so let's ask Harrison if he'll come back. Would love to know the paycheck that it took for Harrison to come back. I think he likes the movies. I do. He was at the premiere. I think he has appreciation for the fans who have admired him and his work. But when I do think of what that scene could have been, while I'm okay with it, it did take me out a little bit. I thought it was jarring. I thought it was weird to see Han that way. And maybe if they didn't give him like sound effects, that would have worked better. They do this really cool thing where they suck the air out of the room during those Force connections between Rey and Kylo. Maybe something similar for that. And by the way, they took that up a notch, didn't they? Now you have Kylo and Rey dancing. They're dueling in different locations. They're grabbing things off of each other. So I liked how they continued. I like how JJ did that. They continued the whole Force the expansion of our knowledge of force powers. I thought that was cool. I don't know if we have an official name for that. I don't know if we have a name for that force power, but I'm into it. This idea that a force user can manipulate his or her position in reality. I'm into that. I mean, and you know what? Another cool thing, I'll mention this inside the journal that Ray was flipping through. You see the image of World Between Worlds. I think that was a great little reference to the Rebels. I thought that was awesome. Okay, so we've gone through like the original characters, and now I want to hit on the original trilogy characters we get, and then the new characters, and then we'll do a little time for the live chat. I know I haven't jumped in there yet, but I'm trying to keep it tight. And so, yeah, let's go ahead and roll on. So next up we have Leia. I mentioned this before. You only had 6 minutes, I think, of footage, they said, with Carrie Fisher performing the role of Leia left from The Force Awakens. So this is really Carrie Fisher in the flesh in scenes that she never shot. And so the script had to be modified to work around. It was clunky at times. It worked at times. I love the line where it's like, you can never underestimate a droid. I mean, that kind of worked. But it was limited dialogue, and you had to use Rey to kind of work around it. I did appreciate the fact that, you know, we had a more formal way of saying goodbye to the character and to Carrie Fisher with her funeral, and then her becoming one with the Force with Kylo, with Ben at that point, I suppose. And you know, I think one thing that Rian Johnson did so well in The Last Jedi, I really wish that Leia had passed in that moment. She would have been sucked out into space, and that would have been the moment that she would have passed, because it was absolutely beautiful, and the music was perfect. And then the Mary Poppins thing happened, which was not so perfect. But it worked. I mean, Leia, I think, complements the story. I don't think it derailed I don't think the way they brought Leia to life in this movie, I don't think it derailed anything, and it worked really well. And it does help with the connectivity of the other previous films. By no means award winning, but I think it is a very nice tribute to the legacy of the character and to Carrie Fisher. Let's go ahead now and talk about Luke. Luke is in the movie. He's a Force ghost. Doesn't look anything like this, though, which I thought was interesting. This was interesting to me. A very interesting decision why this was not the version of Luke Skywalker we got in The Rise of Skywalker. The Force ghost resembles the old crabby man on Ahch-To, which I guess is fair. Okay, so the complaint with Return of the Jedi after George Lucas updated it was he put in Hayden Christensen instead of the old guy. And I'm so sorry that I just forgot the name of the original actor who played the face of Vader in Return of the Jedi, but oh man, it's like something German. It's German sounding. Oh man, that's bad. I'll have to look that up after the show. But the point is, you know, people are like, well, why did you put Hayden in there? You know, shouldn't it have been the older looking Anakin Skywalker? So here you are at the end of episode 9, and you show the old, rugged Luke Skywalker. But shouldn't you put in this version that's on our screen right now of Luke Skywalker? This is the great Jedi Master at his prime, isn't it? So the only thing I can think of is JJ is thinking, well, that's how he died, and that's how he was when he gave his last sacrifice for the galaxy, and so we got long, rugged, white-robed Luke Skywalker. Not the end of the world. This is one of those examples where I think that he pays homage to what Rian Johnson did with The Last Jedi. I think JJ is paying tribute to that. Some people say that there's some spots that he's not. In the same scene, Luke catches the lightsaber, says it was a mistake to throw away the weapon of the Jedi, and then he was wrong. And some people say that is retconning what Rian Johnson did in the movie. I would say that no. I think that Luke learned through the help of Rey that he made a mistake. He was wrong to abandon the galaxy, that he probably could have done more good than bad had he stayed around and tried to turn Ben back to the light. And that's what he's admitting to Rey. Overall, the Force Ghost scene was kind of a letdown because at one time I thought, oh man, Luke is gonna be really involved in this movie, and I think that like somehow like the Jedi from the past will like be involved to defeat the Emperor, and they kind of were. They were, but it just wasn't what I anticipated. But again, I checked my expectations at the door, so it didn't impede me from enjoying the moment when it unfolded on screen. But overall, I thought the ghost scene was okay. It was a little funny. It was more Mark Hamill than Luke Skywalker. I That's my only thing. It felt more like Mark Hamill than Luke Skywalker, and there could be a lot of reasons for that. Maybe it was the fact that he's just bummed how the character was handled in the sequel trilogy. I can tell you I am, and that's just my take. And I'm not telling you how you should think or that you should agree with me. I'm just saying that's how I feel, and maybe you can empathize with that, and maybe you can't, and that's totally fine. But I felt like there wasn't. I was hoping for one last powerful message from Luke. You got, I mean, the Last Jedi, Yoda. They are, you know, our legacy is what we leave behind, or that whole dialogue there about, what the apprentice takes from its master. That was a real great moment in the Last Jedi. Maybe my favorite conversation in the Last Jedi. They are what we leave behind, or whatever the verbiage is. Solid. Didn't get that with Luke, but I move on because I'm just glad, honestly, that he was in the movie in some regard. We also get, and I mentioned this already, so I won't take a whole lot of time. But Han, I thought the moment was incredibly well acted by Harrison Ford, even though I thought it was jarring in the movie, and I thought that last bit where it's like, "Dad, I know," that was a moment that I don't care what, that ripped my heart out. I thought that was a very powerful moment for the obvious reasons, going back to Empire. Okay, so who else do we have to talk about? Oh, hey, this is a character that we've never met before. Ladies and gentlemen, let's talk about Ben Solo. So there's a reason why I've been very distinct about talking about Kylo and talking about Ben. They are two different people, kind of like when you talk about Vader and Anakin. However, Kylo Ren always had a little bit of Ben in him. Ben doesn't talk, except he says one piece of word, ouch. He is healed by Rey there on the wreckage of the Death Star. It also takes away the scar on his face, which I thought was pretty cool. I had really hoped. There were two images that leaked several weeks ago, and they proved to be true. There is a scene where Ben and Rey ignite their sabers next to each other to take on the Emperor. And there's also an image that leaked of the Emperor shooting lightning into the sky in these regal red robes, which I don't understand. I guess he was buried with robes. I don't. These are minor details that I guess overall don't matter, but they annoy me. And shooting lightning in the sky with Rey there. So those actually ended up being true, are accurate. I was disappointed with the lack of utilization of the character of Ben. If you're going to redeem the character, you got to give more than this. He takes down the Knights of Ren. And let's talk about a group that I don't show at all. Don't have a graphic made for Rose Tico, no disrespect, but the story didn't utilize her. And I don't have an image of the Knights of Ren because they are useless. They literally fly around in a ship that spits out smoke, just like Kylo Ren's original shuttle. They just follow Kylo around. And they're just like interns. They're like interns that you have go get coffee or go down and get donuts or like burritos for lunch. They clean up the messes when someone spills a drink on the carpet. They don't do anything. Ben Solo takes them out pretty simply, which was a great moment. I loved watching Ben Solo slaughter them, but we had been teased for these 4 or 5 years that the Knights of Ren were this vicious group, ruthless. Kylo Ren, the leader of the Knights of Ren, he had to earn that title, right? Just wasted. I mean, but maybe that's overall, the fact that this movie does prove to you that there was no plan for the sequel trilogy. because you had The Force Awakens, you had The Last Jedi, and where The Last Jedi ends, it's going this way. JJ took the wheel and brought it right back to tell you the story that he had kind of envisioned the entire time, which would have been fine had they sat down and done The Force Awakens and been like, wow, we just made over $2 billion. Let's really plot out what's going to happen in this next movie and the third one. No. It was, let's get a director in here and writer in Rian Johnson. Let's start writing this thing. Let's have the movie written before this movie is even out in theaters. I mean, Rian Johnson was working on this while the dailies were coming in. And so that will always be my complaint with the sequel trilogy. While there are some great visuals and there's some great characters here, the plan does not work for me. Financially, though, the Disney stockholders are very happy with these movies. By the end of Rise of Skywalker, the Star Wars movies will have grossed more than $5 billion globally. I wanted more for Ben. I've said it before, I'll say it again. Didn't want the helmet to come off Kylo Ren until Rise of Skywalker, or whatever this 9th installment would be. That would have kept the fear and intimidation level at a max. For me, it would have. Would have enjoyed that. And I think, as I mentioned, you have the scene, if you had Carrie there, or maybe, you had Carrie there as a Force ghost, and he turns around and sees that, and maybe that's why he takes the helmet off in the 9th installment. I don't know. I'm just speculating at that point, or I'm just taking guesses, I should say. But not revealing his face until the very end, I think would have been way more powerful. But then, so you have Ben redeemed, which I've been concerned about. I've said this before too. Some people are just bad. Some people make decisions to go bad. Adolf Hitler is responsible for like tens of millions of people dying. If he cuts a check to the Salvation Army right before he dies, the sins aren't absolved. He's still a terrible person, ruthless person, evil. Okay? And that's Kylo Ren to me. Kylo made his decisions that he would have to live or die by. We know that in the novelization, he wasn't necessarily backing the decision to destroy Hosnian Prime, those 4 or 5 planets there in The Force Awakens. He's still an accomplice. He's still carrying out the mission of the First Order. He's still carrying out the mission of Snoke at the time. What we have learned now since is actually the mission of the Emperor, Palpatine, trying to regain his strength to take over the galaxy. Ben doesn't say anything but ouch. He takes out the Knights of Ren, who proved useless. And he gives his life force to Rey to save her. I think it would have been a better ending, honestly, for this movie if they would have both died. I think they would have upset a lot of people, but ultimately the dyad of the Force, giving the ultimate sacrifice so that the galaxy continue on. I can get into that. Could have really dug that. I'm not sure. I'm assuming that the healing thing that Rey learned was over the years she trained with Leia. And of course, we see Baby Yoda do that in The Mandalorian. But how does Ben know how to do that? I mean, I don't think that like life saving, like that kind of skill is something that, and maybe it was taught during his training with Luke at the temple. I have no idea. But that just seemed really bizarre to me that he knew how to just pump her full of life force, and then he died. And the kiss was terrible. Kiss took me out. It was one of those things where it was like, wow, this is trying to make everybody happen, or try and make everybody happy. It makes no sense. I don't know what the kiss means. Does that kiss mean it's a romantic one? Like they're in love, like what we understand to be like lovers, husband and wife, wife and wife, husband and husband. You know what I'm saying? Like, is it like that, or was that a kiss of thanks? You saved me, and I'm so happy you're back to the light side, Ben. That's a really long time. Now, they're only cousins, so it's not as weird, right? Because, like, Luke and Leia were brother and sister. And Star Wars fans get put over the burner for that one a lot, right? Because, gross, incest. But that's a really long kiss just to say thank you. It felt awkward. It did not work. Did not work for me. I'm thinking that I thought it would make Reylo fans out there happy, but everyone seems pissed off about it. So I don't know. I don't try and mess with that stuff. So yeah, Ben was a bit of a letdown, and I think that's probably if I held on to one thing, I didn't want to see Ben get redeemed. But if he did, and this is a cop out, but well, I'd be okay with it if they did it right. And I just think that in a lot of ways, I I don't think the runtime and the quality of a movie have a direct correlation, but I think in this case they do. I think The Rise of Skywalker benefits from being 3 hours. I think it benefits from being 3 hours or 3:15. And I think you put a lot of that time in the beginning. One thing I think they need a whole. We got to flesh out the Emperor. Let's just go ahead and get to this. We need to go here. This is where we have been heading for this entire episode. I've been trying to hold the suspense, and I'm not trying to be overly critical. I had a lot of fun watching this movie. There's just some inconsistencies that I can't roll with, but there are some moments that I want to celebrate. You want a positive? I love everything with the Emperor as far as the look, the design, the voice. Ian McDiarmid, I think, gives the most consistent performance across all 9 films. I think it's great to hear his voice rattle. I loved the throwback. How the dark side can lead to many abilities that some consider more unnatural. I thought that was great, and I loved it. But I don't understand certain things of the Emperor. How is he broadcasting to the galaxy? In the movie, we don't understand. I mean, he's got thousands upon thousands of starships. How are they all manned? We learn in I think it's the Art of the Rise of Skywalker. We learn that he actually has all these followers that are procreating to staff all these ships, which that seems a little intense. They're like cult. They're the occult or whatever. There's a term, but I don't remember. I guess where I get confused with the Emperor, because I love bringing him back, and whether or not the Emperor was actually planned to be in the 9th film, I don't care anymore. I think if he was planned, there should have been some mention of him as a threat in 8 or as early as the end of 7. But that's just me. I don't understand, how can the Emperor, who has always been focused on living forever, gaining immortality, cheating death, how can his mission be getting Rey to get to Exegol so that she can kill him, so that all the Sith can live in her? Now, there is one bit of dialogue there. I think he says something about how his spirit will live in her, as will all the Sith. So is she kind of becoming like a Momin from the Vader comic, where the spirits can live in her and still continue on? I don't know. That didn't feel very fleshed out. That did not. That was strange. Grandpa you're a Palpatine. Grandpa Palpatine. That was interesting. In a sense, that's the explanation of why Rey is OP, right? But it also retcons a lot of her story, that you don't have to be somebody, to come in here and save the day. And then for her to, at the very end of the movie, be like, I'm Rey Skywalker, kind of thought she would have just been like, who are you? And she would have just said, Rey. And that would have worked for me too. Then she could have looked out at the binary suns, and the movie ends. I just want some explanation of, I want to know how the Emperor came back. And you have in this crawl that the dead speak, and that he's broadcasting the galaxy, and we quickly learn that the galaxy only has 18 hours before the Emperor goes on this rampage. But it's like, how did he come back? I feel like that's a really big plot point to explain on camera. 2.5 hours. You can only cover so much you can. And maybe the crawl was used in a way this time around to buy them extra time with that 2.5 hours. Well, if we say that he's already back and he's sent out this message, we don't actually have to go into how. Okay. I thought another planet was interesting. They went to Exegol. That's cool. They could have used Dathomir again. I'm glad they didn't use Mustafar there, although I like that Mustafar was included, even though it looked nothing like the Mustafar that we've seen. Apparently, that part of Mustafar is healing. But yeah, I guess I feel like a lot of people have been saying this. It's like, take hammer, smash glass. Like, in case of an emergency, use the Emperor, and that's what happened. There's a lot here to love. Again, the performance of Ian McDiarmid. I like the expansion of the lore there. I mean, I thought it was kind of cool to see all the spirits of Sith past, or at least the occult in that like arena type of thing. I thought it was great, but I felt like once Rey got to Exegol, the substance of the story really just evaporated for me, and I felt like very little was happening there, and more was happening out with the battle. And of course, Finn and Janna trying to take down the main Star Destroyer that was, communicating with all the other ones, right? That whole plot point. But I felt like we built up to something potentially really cool in those final moments, and it didn't fully smash through. And there were a couple of moments throughout this movie where I felt like there was some emotional intensity building, but it just didn't quite get there to like blow you away. And I don't know what that would have been. I mean, I like the idea that Rey's hearing all those previous Jedi. It would have been cooler, I think, if you would have like seen them appear, but that's just me. And maybe that's, then you're getting in the territory of fan fiction, which I think there are more fanfic writers now on the internet after the Rise of Skywalker. People are furious, crazy. So overall, I'm glad they brought the Emperor in, but again, this is where I think a better, stronger plan for the sequel trilogy would have worked better. In my opinion, we would have gotten something a little bit more fleshed out. I want to see how he comes back. I want to understand how the Final Order works in conjunction with the First Order, in conjunction with Operation Cinder. I want to learn all that stuff. I don't think you learn that stuff in the movie, no matter what. I think that's for another day, and I'm totally fine with that. Other new characters, really quick, that we had here. We had Janna, who I guess we're supposed to believe by the end of this movie is supposed to be the daughter of Lando Calrissian, because he is able to. He's sitting there at the end of the celebration, and he says something about how, hey, where are you from? And she's like, oh, I was abducted or whatever. And she's like, I want to find out who I am. And he's like, well, it's about time we do. And I'm like, okay, well, I guess that means that we're going to get, I guess that means that we're mom and dad, and then like our daughter and father, and that's fine. Like I didn't really have a preference about that, but I thought it was really random at the very end. You're having this huge celebration, and it's like, oh, we might be related, and I'm like, well, that's a little silly. That's a little silly to me. But overall, I thought like, here's a character that's in here just to advance the story. And that's really all she was there to do. She's there to show up, tell them how to get across. They got to rest. No, they got to keep going because for some reason, all this has to happen in 18 hours. Only 18 hours. All these events take place in 18 hours. That makes like no sense to me. But, she's there to help them get there to the Death Star, and then she joins the crew, and they're going to take down the Star Destroyer, and, it works out fine. I thought the character was cool and served the purpose. I didn't mention him earlier. Well, I have in a few ways, but Lando does a nice job. Billy Dee Williams comes back, and the way he was revealed, I did not expect it, and I loved it. I loved when I heard him back on the radio the communications with Poe. He brings on those ships. It was great. Seeing him fly around in the X-Wing with Chewie, it was beautiful. I got no complaints. But again, that moment at the very end with the Janna character, very just caught me off guard, and it was strange. Okay, Zori Bliss. Zori Bliss, to me, was a really cool character that just randomly shows up. Like, again, like, so much convenience to make this movie happen, which is a complete opposite of The Last Jedi, right? The Last Jedi was all about giving you a story that was unexpected, and sometimes things don't go according to plan, a la Canto Bight. All that work, and it pays off for nothing, and it gets worse. So this movie is the opposite. This movie kind of goes exactly the way it should go, because like you can follow along, the checkpoints, and Zori Bliss is a great example of that. She shows up, she's able to get them to somebody who can reprogram C-3PO, Babu Frik, which honestly I think had two of the better moments in the movies when he shows up. I thought that was hysterical. Where he's in the cockpit of the Falcon. That made me laugh. No, wait, was that in the cockpit of the Falcon, or maybe that was in in Zori's Y-wing? I'm failing to remember in this moment, but that really made me laugh. But then it's like, how in the world? So they get to Babu Frik and they're reprogramming C-3PO, And they're like, oh, it's like a Sith message. And then she's like, well, who are you hanging around that speaks Sith? And I guess this was the other thing that confused me. It's just like, okay, so I guess that message from the Emperor told the galaxy that the Sith would rise again, and now everybody knows about the Sith, which is really weird because when you go through like Rebels, a lot of people in that cartoon series, the Force is like mythological already in that moment. Rogue One, the Force is this like myth. Okay, you go through the original trilogies. It's an old religion that's dead. Tarkin talking to Vader. You get 3 decades later, after Return of the Jedi, and Luke Skywalker has been, training a dozen Jedi, we think, at his one temple. I don't think that the galaxy was fully aware. It wasn't like you had the Jedi Order back from the Republic where there were thousands of Jedi and they were acting as like a governmental policing force separate from the actual Republic. I mean, it's not that climate. I was very confused how people were so aware of the Sith language and the Sith in general in this movie, because everybody knows about the Sith. At least that's how it feels. But I think the character itself was like really cool, and I liked the playfulness between her and Poe. Very quick to welcome him back into her life. Let's go off on an adventure. There clearly seems to be a romantic past. We learned that Poe actually used to sell spice. Not going to judge. What do you think Han Solo did before he joined the Star Wars story? Yeah, that's right. He was shipping cargo and selling spice, which is drugs. He's a drug dealer. That's what it is. I need to get some water in my throat. It's we're at that hour mark of the show, so I want to finish the characters real quick, and then we'll wrap the show up. And then in part 2, then we can kind of just go over specific elements. I'll do a here's what I liked and here's what I disliked, just to keep it a little bit more concise. One is huge thanks to everyone joining us for the live show Monday morning, December 30th. Of course, the rewind is on the channel. All the podcast ways you can listen: iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud. That water was absolutely necessary. All right. So moving on, we've talked about Zori. The last characters that we need to hit here, I think, are Hux and Pride. So the Hux character to me, I think, is really interesting because it's, I don't know, it's kind of the opposite of a Rey in the sense that Hux is part of this legacy, and he feels like he has to really earn his keep within the First Order, and that's what we get in The Force Awakens. And he looks at Kylo Ren as competition to get Snoke's approval. Then Hux just becomes like comic relief, and the punching bag in The Last Jedi doesn't really work with me. Not that it doesn't work with me. It was like two different versions of the character. I mean, that's all. If I'm Domino Gleeson, I'm like, what the hell do you want from me? This isn't right. And then you get to The Rise of Skywalker, and this felt more in line with what we were getting. It was like a hybrid. I felt like this was more probably the direction that JJ was giving Domino Gleeson in The Force Awakens, but kept it somewhat consistent with The Last Jedi. It worked for me. It did work for me. I kind of assumed for a long time that he would actually be a turncoat because of what he said. He would rather see Kylo. He doesn't care if the Resistance wins. He just wants Kylo Ren to lose. That's what he wants. And I thought the Price character was really cool. I thought it was a cool concept. He is this, enforcer, this officer within the First Order who's actually, in some ways, like a spy. He's doing the Emperor's bidding. He's in direct communication with the Emperor. Very Tarkin-esque, a little Thrawn looking like, right? But not blue. But he's doing the work of the Emperor, and he's actually in charge of the Final Order. And the whole aesthetic, I was into. I think if there's anything that JJ and his designers, the art department's really nailed in this whole thing, is the design of the Imperials or the First Orders or the Final Order people. All that stuff looks so good, and I'm so into it, and I think that's why a lot of people do root for the Empire, is because they just want to see more cool new stuff.
I mean, not at all in this movie. You go to the Mandalorian finale, and you see the spoiler, but you see the incinerator trooper light up the cantina. Freaking cool. Loved it. Absolutely loved it. Really just enjoyed all those aesthetics. And then Price, the way he dies, he kind of gets blown through the window of the command ship. I thought it was pretty cool. Yeah, that's my list of characters and my take on the performances and the role in the movie. Sorry, I got a little distracted. I want to dive into live chat real quick. I got 5 minutes, and I looked down, and we got Dale with us. He's been avoiding the Rise of Skywalker reviews on purpose, and this automatically loaded, or I accidentally clicked it. Whatever, I had trouble logging back in this morning. Well, Dale, I'm really sorry to hear about that. By no means was I trying to spoil the movie for you, but I will tell you that the title of the movie does say spoilers, I thought. Part 1. I've been pretty spoiler heavy on the whole thing, and if not, that is my fault. But this is definitely spoiler talk. I did like a big disclaimer at the beginning, so I apologize. Mr. S, I'm here for Dale content. That's funny. So let's go ahead and do this, because I've been talking for the last hour about characters, and I hope you enjoyed that. I hope there were some points that you agreed. I hope that there's maybe some things that you didn't agree with me on, and we get to have a conversation there. So I'm going to go through the live chat real quick and see what we got here. We got Charlie Skywalker in the live chat asking me how the ravioli turned out. This week I had my family came up, and my girlfriend / fiance, Mandy, and I, we all made my grandmother's ravioli recipe, and it was delicious. The recipe it says it makes 15 dozen, but we rolled the dough like not thin enough, and so we only made like I think 8 dozen ravioli, but 8 dozen ravioli is still a lot, and we ate very well this week, and it was a great way to celebrate the holidays. Charlie mentioning about Rey, she was a fully grown character in this episode. She took Luke and Leia's position and ran with it. Yeah, I'll go with that. I'll go with that. Charlie says, I agree with David. The instant knowledge was a stumbling block in regards to Rey and The Force Awakens, which is where the Mary Sue comments came from. Thought it was explained as a block on her abilities broken by Kylo in The Force Awakens. Okay, that's interesting. Thislamek, I think I'm saying his or her name right. I'm sorry. I feel like I mispronounce it every time. Finn's lines from this entire trilogy. Rey, woo, oh, they hate that ship. Rey. Okay, so some opposition to what I said about the fact that I like Finn. Some people feel like maybe the dialogue for Finn was not that deep. You know, I really thought that in this movie we would get more background into his origins. We did learn that Jannah was also a former stormtrooper, and her battalion or whatever was ordered to shoot a bunch of villagers, and they all put their guns down. We did learn that, but yeah, we didn't really get to explore Finn that much more. Maybe I'm missing something, but and I guess that he gets to hang out with the Resistance, and maybe he becomes the next general that comes back in 30 years and saves the day like Lando Calrissian. I don't know. They should have played up his force sensitive ability once he went toe-to-toe with Kylo and the lightsaber. I'm assuming that is in regards to the scene from The Force Awakens. I think that's what they did, though. I think in the first movie, and especially the way they teased The Force Awakens, that Finn had the ability to be force sensitive. And remember, throughout The Rise of Skywalker, he says, hey, Rey, I got something I got to tell you. And I think it's because he's sensitive to the Force. He has this feeling. There was some dialogue to hint at that, and so I'll be excited to see to see where they go. John Boyega was like really honest in a conversation. Really, that he's something like, "You're not going to Disney Plus me." I don't have the full quote in front of me to read from, but I don't think he wants to go to Disney Plus. I think that if there's another Star Wars movie down the road, maybe we'll see him. But I just kind of assumed we were done seeing Rey, Finn, and Poe as in live action. But that's just me. Thislamek, Finn should have died once he tried to take down the cannon. He could have been a martyr for the defected stormtroopers in Rise of Skywalker. That's an interesting concept. Yeah, I kind of thought that's where the character was going to die because Rian Johnson had taken him away so far from the rest of the cast in the main events of the movie. I thought for sure, okay, he's going to come back and and he'll make amends by sacrificing himself for the group to stay along. But obviously, they set that up for Rey. Okay, so there's seemed to be a really big conversation in the live chat about the dialogue. Dialogue was bad from 77. He delivered where he needed to. Finn showed his force sensitivity in a great way. He did not know how to express it other than he felt close to Rey. Okay, Charlie Skywalker. Very interesting take there. I think that's really interesting. I think that's a really good point. I really do. Another one. What was the Mando doing during the Rise of Skywalker? Where is Baby Yoda currently in the timeline? Will he cross paths with Rey later on? Great show as usual. Well, I appreciate that comment. We're in two different worlds here. So the Mandalorian is taking place 4 or 5 years after the Return of the Jedi, and the Rise of Skywalker is 31, 32 years after Return of the Jedi. So we got some distance. We're not sure. Maybe the Mando dies, and who knows, the way the season 2 sets up, with all those things. Interesting. Charlie Skywalker mentions that this was 3PO's redemption story. Okay, that's interesting. Charlie Skywalker, I think that he was just a creation of Force abilities. In regards to Snoke, he was just a creation of Force abilities that Palpatine could use to manifest himself into, which is why he was so easy to kill in The Last Jedi. That's fascinating, but here's my thing with Snoke. The comic, The Rise of Kylo Ren, has Kylo Ren flying, or I guess Ben Solo after the destruction of the Jedi Temple, flying to Snoke, and he finds Snoke with hat and a hair, and he's in his robes on this very green planet, very planty planet. And he's like, "Oh, look what Master Luke, Skywalker did to you." I don't know if I read that wrong, but I read it as Master Skywalker did something to Kylo to make him look like that. But that Snoke looks like all the Snokes in the tube on Exegol in The Rise of Skywalker. So I need to go back. I will report back. I want you to investigate this, but I think as of right now, I feel like that's a huge inconsistency right now. If he's just a creation of the Emperor, I got some confusion. Some things are not lining up here with how can Snoke be home to this planet, influencing Kylo, go up against Luke Skywalker, but something isn't lining up here, right? I need to explore that further. Apparently, and I tried to do that before I even went on today for the live show, but it is just a little too confusing. I want you to read that comic book. Obviously, you've watched the movie, but there is that whole thing does really just boggle my mind. Something's not lining up there, and I hope that gets smoothed out. Taken care of. Charlie Skywalker wants a Disney Plus series for the Knights of Ren. Don't think it's going to happen. Waste of time. You know what you're getting? You're going to get the Rise of Kylo Ren issues 2, 3, and 4 here from Charles Soule as we enter the new year, and that's and that's what you'll get there. They're not doing. There's no way they would do Knights of Ren. I wouldn't say there's no way, but what's the story you're going to tell? They were the story for them was supposed to be the Rise of Skywalker. Maybe it was supposed to be in the 8th movie. JJ was building something up with the Knights of Ren in Force Awakens, and I don't think ultimately we got what he was envisioning. Okay, going to take a couple more comments from the live chat, and then we're going to blow out of here. Charlie Skywalker seems to agree with me. 5 to 10 more minutes in the beginning scenes to add to the backstory would have been perfect. I agree with that. Kyle McCaskill, every actor in this trilogy was miscast. Do not agree with that. I don't know. That's your opinion, and you're so entitled to that, and you're welcome to share that here. And I think it creates interesting conversation. I think Adam Driver's Kylo Ren was fantastic. You know what I would say? What Kylo Ren is, I thought that is what an Anakin Skywalker was going to look like in the prequels. Not even close. I would almost think that Hayden Christensen is Kylo Ren in a way, that whiny, bratty, entitled thing. I think that would have played better. That would have played well for Kylo. But I don't want to change Kylo. Adam Driver's Kylo Ren is perfect to me. I think Daisy Ridley has grown in the character of Rey. I think Finn was done well by Poe, Finn was done well by John. Poe was great with Oscar. I don't see it. I don't see how casting was an issue. But it's art, it's subjective, and you can I guess interpret it however you want, but yeah, I'm just not seeing it, man. I'm just not seeing it. But would love to have that further conversation with you. It doesn't seem like you have any suggestions, but that's okay. We'll go with it. Gomez, Comic Collector, is in the live chat, and I just lost where his comment was, so let me try and pull that back up. Always cool to see him in the live chat. He said, hope you had an awesome Christmas and hope you guys have a happy new year, broski. Good to see him. He is one of the first people I met on YouTube when I started the channel back 3.5 years ago. And then, yeah, Dale forgives me. Dale forgives me. I think Dale forgive me, everybody. I really wasn't trying to spoil anything for you. Okay, cool. So I think I made my way through the live chat, and I appreciate everyone getting together on a Monday morning where it's not the usual time for Beyond the Blast Doors to go live. Like, I'm so aware that usually we go live Sunday mornings at 11 a.m. Here on the YouTube channel. And that's where I believe we're going to continue going live for the Unseen Future. We're doing some research. We're not sure how the scope of things is going to really impact us. We don't think it will, but we would say that we are a channel for adults. But we're trying to take action now to make sure that we can continue using YouTube as a platform. But we'll always be on iTunes, Spotify, SoundCloud, Stitcher, and you can always check us out there. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. I want to remind you, BeyondTheBlastDoors.com, that's where we start our Star Wars conversation, and we have articles there for you where we post weekly, sometimes daily, about just content that we have. And right now you can see that we have a review right now online of the first The Rise of Kylo Ren comic. New member of the BTB family, Sam Canzero, joins us, and he's breaking down the future of Star Wars, the holiday list that I created for shopping. So, check out BeyondTheBlastDoors.com if you have not already. That is where we have our conversation. That's where we started in the course and its expansion here on BTB Live. You can always catch, of course, the most recent episodes of both Beyond the Blast Doors and of streaming Star Wars. We're actually live streaming right now on BeyondTheBlastDoors.com. Is something we've never done before, so we're really happy that we were able to do that today. All right, an hour and 20 minutes. That is a solid first swing at this Rise of Skywalker, and I want to thank you for joining us on this Monday. Be on the lookout on our Twitter, especially for part 2 of our spoiler conversation. We'll get David and Jesse in on the mix, and we will tackle the Rise of Skywalker. Again, I overall really liked it, but I do have my frustrations. And so what I'm hoping, what I'm really excited about is I think when Jesse, David, and I are together, we're going to be really celebrating what we loved, what we really enjoyed about it, how we were able to turn our minds off and enjoy the 2-hour, 20-minute movie. I know that at times I was critical, but you know what? We're passionate. We love Star Wars, and that's why we do the show, even in the first place. So I hope this is the last time that we will probably be together before the start of the new year. So again, thank you for everyone who joined us live. Thank you to those who are listening to the podcast episode. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope you had a happy holiday, and I hope that you have an incredible celebration on New Year's Eve, New Year's Day. Please be safe, have all the fun, and I look forward to continuing to talk Star Wars with you in the new year. 2020 is going to have a lot. We'll get a lot of stuff for Disney Plus, and who knows, maybe they'll announce the next Star Wars movie. We'll find out.
Thank you for watching Beyond the Blast Doors. Be sure to subscribe to our channel. Don't forget, give us a thumbs up and leave a comment. Beyond the Blast Doors, a Star Wars conversation.